right, folks. So welcome back. Where we left off yesterday was we had went and gathered all of our tools necessary. We got our jugs cleaned and sterilized and ready to go. As I mentioned then, it was starting to rain, and I thought it was going to let up and lighten up that we could come out and tap a few trees yesterday, but that just didn't happen. It continued to rain throughout the afternoon. I just really didn't feel like dealing with that. So here we are this morning, and we're going to start tapping these trees. So where we're at here is on the edge of our property, and what we have here right beside me is a silver maple tree. Now, most people associate maple production, maple syrup production, with sugar maple, and that is certainly the case. They produce more sugar per volume, so they're more desirable, but know that all maple trees do produce sugar and will in fact produce syrup. So brings us to the bigger point of why I am starting this channel. So I want to talk about plants and all kinds of plants. I've been a plant enthusiast since I was born. My mother was a horticulture major at Penn State University. She took 2 years, and then she had to give it up because of the birth of my sister. But growing up, plants were always a part of my life. We always had landscaping beds, vegetable gardens, flower beds, things of that nature. When I'd go to the grocery store with my mom, I was allowed to usually come home with a treat. Every now and then it was a candy bar or a soda, but more often than not, she had absolutely no objection to me bringing home either a book or a plant. And I tried to grow many things in my youth, from Venus flytraps to you name it, whatever the grocery store sold at that time. And so plants have always been a part of my life. I went on then to get a degree in ornamental horticulture with an emphasis in landscape and nursery technology, which gave me a very good understanding of plants, identifying them and understanding how they grow, how to grow them better, how to propagate them, things of that nature. And so I ended up with a vast amount of knowledge when it comes to plants. They're all around me. My wife and I have taken the time to landscape our property here. We're always expanding it. When we first moved here, there were no landscape beds. I think we're up to 15 now. And this is a good part of the season to start this, because some of those beds are really going to start coming alive, and we'll have some more subjects to talk about. Yeah, there's all sorts of things. I've got a collection of orchids and some tropical pitcher plants we can look at and talk about. Spring flowering bulbs are soon going to be coming out here in Pennsylvania, so we're looking forward to that, and that's going to be very exciting. Yeah, plants, all sorts of plants, trees, plants, your yard, plants. All sorts of things. So we're going to talk about all different kinds of plants, and hopefully you guys have some suggestions for me on things you'd like to see. This year, doing maple syrup is kind of an afterthought, with the idea of launching this channel, because again, going back to plants, I see a lot of videos out there saying, okay, grab a drill tap here, put it in, and then we'll collect it, we'll boil it down, which is all great, but I haven't really come across anything that talks about the plants, the trees themselves. This time of year, they're very difficult to identify, and maybe as the year progresses and they start fleshing out with their leaves and things, we can come back through and I can teach you how to identify them so that you know what trees are on your property to be able to perhaps make maple syrup or black walnut syrup, next season. Myself, how I know these trees is I'm out here all the time, and again, I have a vast knowledge of plants. When I graduated college, I probably knew something like, somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 plants off the top of my head, genus, species, growth characteristics. Now, that was 25 years ago, and I've lost a lot of that knowledge, but I still have a lot in there. And, over the years, I've worked, a couple of different professions. Primarily out of college, I worked for one of the largest landscape companies in the nation, doing a lot of commercial properties in urban and suburban settings. Following that, I moved into juvenile justice, and that's basically prison for teenagers. And I've worked with some of the worst kids in the state of Pennsylvania behind razor wire. But one theme that I always kept throughout that was one program I worked in the summertime when the school shut down. I would take the kids and we would do landscape maintenance, and I would teach them basics of edging, mulching, pruning, things of that nature, so that they could potentially get a job when they got out of placement and move on with their lives. Other things that I did was teach container gardening, so that kids that were from an urban setting, from a larger city, which we often dealt with, could reliably grow tomatoes, potatoes, onions, carrots, things of that nature, using simple buckets and things of that nature that they could grow on their front steps, on their back steps, somewhere. If they had just a small plot, they could still get some fresh produce from that. So I've spent a lot of time teaching that sort of thing. I then transitioned into commercial cannabis growing, where I oversaw thousands upon thousands of cannabis plants, probably the largest producer here in Pennsylvania. I did that for almost 8 years. And now I find myself at a crossroads where I'm no longer doing that, and the time seems right. Throughout my life, working in juvenile justice, working in the cannabis industry, I kept hearing a couple of themes over and over again, and this isn't me, trying to toot my own horn. This is me, just giving a little bit of background and understanding. But, the things I heard, themes over and over again, was you should be a teacher, and you know more about plants than anyone I have ever met. And, when people bring up being a teacher, I would always have the same retort, and that was always, have you learned something from me? And, everybody would always say, yeah. It's, well, am I not then a teacher? So, let's take our classroom outdoors. We don't need a classroom to be a teacher. We could teach and learn, right here in the forest, in the setting. But what can I teach? Well, if I do know a little bit more about plants than some people, why not teach what I know? I'm not going to claim to be an expert on anything. I'm more of an extreme hobbyist, I guess you would say. There are people far more knowledgeable out there on a lot of the subjects that we can talk about, such as orchids and specifics about those. But I can show you what works for us and how you can be successful at home. So anyway, that's kind of what got me into doing the maple syrup this year. We had a pretty harsh winter here in central Pennsylvania, where we had snow on the ground pretty much throughout the month of December. And as soon as it thawed off, we got another big storm in January, and the snow is, you could still see it on the ground. But up until about a week ago, it was, too deep to really even get through meaningfully. So, I thought, well, how can I talk about plants when I can't even be out there amongst them? And so as the snow started melting, we came to an important date in maple sugar lore, which is Valentine's Day. And as old timers and the old folklore went, you start tapping your trees for your sap and sugar production on the Saturday closest to Valentine's Day, February 14th. Well, that just so happened to fall on a Saturday, I believe it was, this year, and here we are on the 19th. I'm a little bit behind, but that's because I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? Trees, plants, show, channel. So let's get in and talk about some of these things, and let's do some maple extraction here. And so I made the decision that I'm going to do a small batch run of maple syrup, something I haven't done since 2017, I believe, is the last time I actually did this. So we're gonna get into it, and we're gonna see what we get. I'll have something to show you. We will end up with syrup, that I'm sure of. How I boil it off, I'm not too certain yet. I've done it before, so I have an idea, but we'll see when we get there. So anyway, now let's get back into the maple here. So behind me is a silver maple. Now these are very fast growing trees. This was planted here about 20 years ago, so I wouldn't say it's old growth by any stretch of the imagination, but the last time I made syrup, This one was maybe about 12 inches in diameter at best. Now, if you go this direction on it, it's probably closer to 20 or more inches. So it's put on quite a bit of growth since then. And a general rule that people will tell you when it comes to maple syrup production is you don't want to tap trees that are less than 12 inches in diameter, so the width of the tree. So the bigger the tree is, the more taps you can add. So I'm going to start out by adding 1 tap to this. Now, as I started off, I was talking about how all maple trees produce sugar, right? And so obviously the biggest association, I'm trying to adjust the tripod as I go here, the biggest association with maple syrup is, of course, the sugar maple tree. And sugar maples do grow around here, but they are by no means the most prevalent. They're not the most common. What we do see a lot around here is these silver maples and a lot of red maples, and we're going to tap into those. Now, as I stated a couple times here, all maple trees have sugar. Why the sugar maple tree is more desirable than, say, a silver maple or a red maple or any other kind of maple you might come across, is that a sugar maple, the sugar content in its sap will be roughly 3 to 5%. In silver maples, red maples, the other maple species, Norway maples, things of that nature, the sugar content is usually about 1%, at best 3%. So what that translates into is it takes a lot more sap from these trees to actually boil down to the syrup. So in states and areas where they have a lot of sugar maples and they do a lot of production, where they get that 3 to 5%, the general rule is about 40 to 50 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. I find that when I've done this in the past, I'm probably more to the 50 to 60 gallons of sap to get that 1 gallon, if not more. Honestly, one year I did this and I pulled, I think it was about 90 gallons of sap to get about 1.5 gallons. So, you know, that's where we're at, and we'll see where we end up this year. So, you know, I've got all my equipment. I did forget a few things, and I told you if I forgot any tools as I went along, I'd mention those today. The first one I'm going to point out is boots. You're going to want a good pair of boots because as the sugar season is also referred to the mud season. And so as this snow melts, we start getting the spring showers, the earth starts thawing out. There's not an intense sun to be able to burn that water off, to evaporate it, and the plants aren't actively growing as far as the yard goes and things like that. So a lot of that water just kind of sits on the surface, runs off, and everything becomes mud. So boots are going to be very, very important. So what I'm looking at here with this maple tree, let's get into this. What I'm looking at with this maple tree here is where is my best spot to tap this particular tree. And so what I'm looking at here is a couple of things. One, I want it in an area where my container is going to sit relatively flat. Now, there it's on quite a bit of an angle, but what I notice here is the friendly squirrels have been digging around in here, so I can pull some of this these walnut husks and some of these leaves back and make myself a nice little nest that my jug can sit in there nice and relatively level. It's pretty stable. Now, other things I'm looking for are root flares. So if you look right down here on this part of the tree, you'll see that this big old root comes up and then joins the trunk, which starts about here. Here's another example of a root flare, and you'll find those around. Now, these are your main feeders for these trees. So this feeder, this root flare here is going to feed primarily this bigger branch that goes up through here. They're all going to feed the whole tree, but that's going to be a main source of sap running up through there. So we're going to try and target one of these root flares or just above it once we tap into this into the trunk here. So let me see if I can get set up here. We'll start breaking out some tools, and we'll start the process of getting this syrup going here. set. Alright, hopefully we got a good video there. I'll bring you in closer once we start tapping the tree and things of that nature. But, so, first thing, we got that all leveled up, relatively flat area. Get the cap off of there. It's not going to be necessary. So the next thing we're going to look at is our drill. We're going to want our drill and we're going to need our spiles. So I'm going to get my tools out here. We got our drill still ready to go. I got my mallet. I'm going to get into my zip pouch here. I'm going to find a spile and my cleaning tool. So that gives me everything I needed right there. And so really simple. So what you want to do is we marked this off at 1.5 inches yesterday so that we have a little bit of a pocket behind the spile. If you go a little deeper than that, no big deal. Now, most recommend that when you drill these holes, you do it on an upward angle. I suppose that's because gravity will pull the fluid down and further in. If you go in level, it's not going to make that big of a difference. What I find is as soon as you tap these, generally, that hole's going to fill up with liquid and it's going to start running. So it's not like you got to come out here with a protractor and try and get at a specific angle or anything else. I just try and shoot them a little bit upward into the tree because that's what all the old timers recommend, and pretty much everything universally says that's what you do. So again, I'm going to follow this root flare up. I'm going to find a spot right about here where it's relatively clear on the trunk. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to tap my hole. I'm going to pull that back to clear that. All right, we got a nice clean hole there, actually. I'm going to have a whole lot of cleaning to do in there. Yep. Okay. So, over at that point, we've got our hole drilled right here, and as you can see, it's already starting to drip some sap. So we're going to go ahead and put our spile in there. I'm just going to tap that home so it's snug in there, which it is. And what we should see here pretty quickly is a drip or two starting to flow from there. I hate to waste it, but I'm doing this for demonstration purposes. So there you go. There's your first drip. So that's a pretty good flow you can see already. So I'll set this back a little bit here. Center of gravity. We're going to get into actually getting our line on there. If this falls over, I'll grab it as quickly as I can. Now, yesterday when we packed this up, we packed up a variety of sized lines. So now I'm going to go through, I'm going to try and find one that will get into there. It's even probably a little longer than I actually need it. So let's look around here. Oh, that might be the one right there. Yeah, so that one will nicely fit into my spout here and will fit onto my spile there. Now, one of those tools that I told you, if I forgot, I would talk about today, and here it is. It's a Yeti 32 ounce. I use this for ice water. They work great for keeping my water cold throughout the day, but I'm doing something a little different with it today, and I have filled it up with the hottest tap water I can get out of my kitchen sink. And I'm going to dip this tubing in here, and I'm going to hold it there for a moment or two. Actually, we're going to do the other end because it's already had a spile on that end. And I'm going to hold it in there, and what that's going to do is it's going to soften up the plastic in that tubing and make it that I can easily slide it right onto that spile. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a swirl. Just keep it in there just long enough. Throw my lid back on so I don't lose my hot water. And then I'm just going to simply pop that on. And it went on there nice and easy because it was nice and warm. And so now that I have that on there, guess what's coming next? A sock. And so when I talked about this yesterday, I said I would take a sock and I would tie it into a knot around that tube, like so, and then I just set it right over the top. Now that I do to keep insects out, debris that's falling off the tree, so on and so forth. And I don't need that tool here. Oh, bummer. But what I like to do with my little lids here is I pick up that handle, straddle that lid, and I put it in there. So I'm here looking at this tube right now, and it's difficult at best to see, but you can see a little rivulet of sap that's running down through there. So we're already producing. We've got some sap going into the tree, and we're going to be checking on these every day. I just heard a drip into the bucket. But we're going to be checking on these daily to make sure that they're not overflowing. I'll be emptying them into another container where I'll bury them in snow to keep the sap fresh as long as possible before I have to boil it off. But I'm probably going to be boiling this off in the next probably 5 days, no matter how much I have, because I don't want it to go to waste. If I'm going to put this much effort in and take energy from the tree, then I'm going to do the best I can to ensure that my effort goes to something. So that's that. That's one tree. Now, if this one's really producing well, I might come back in and throw another tap in. I can fit multiple taps in there, but we'll see what it does. So let's gather up our tools here, and we'll move on to yet another tree that I have set up and ready to go. And I mean, that's the real basic of it. Again, silver maple. You can tell them by the bark. I know them because I'm out here all the time and have, spent a lot of time identifying the maple trees on my property just for this purpose. But let's move on to the next tree. All right, we're not going too far. There's another silver maple down through the woods here that I already scouted out and have a spot picked for. And I already brought my container down here. This is a little cumbersome carrying a selfie stick, my tools, and this container. So here we are at tree number 2. And so again, this is another silver maple tree. Trying to get this thing stable as a joy. But here we have another silver maple tree, and I'm going to point out a few things here if I can ever get this camera stabilize. There we go. Phone is stabilized. So one of the things I'm going to point out here is this vine. There's 2 major ones, a couple of smaller ones. What you're looking at there is poison ivy, and it's not too much of a threat to me right now, but I don't want that to grow up into the tree and take over, which it's actually doing. So, I talk about the tools we bring with us. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut a section right out of that sucker. Like so. I'm up about 6-8 inches. Do the same thing and just knock that right out of the way. Now there's no way for that to put nutrient up to the rest of that. So the top will die off eventually. It'll fall apart and fall out. But we're going to do the same thing over here right quick. And there you can see the whole thing is separated. Now this upper part is going to die off, and again, eventually it'll shatter or fall out of the tree. I'll probably have to come back down with some kind of herbicide, or just continue to cut these off as the season progresses so that they don't reinvigorate themselves and come back. So again, here we are. It's another silver maple tree. Here's a massive root flare comes up through here. So anywhere on this side of the tree is a good spot to tap. Trying to find a nice stable spot. This seems like the best spot, which is why I put the container there in the first place. Hopefully it's not out of frame. Looks like it might be a little bit. So we're just going to back up here a little bit. And there you can see the container, the tree that I'm targeting. I'm going to be going for a root flare there, somewhere up in here where it's relatively flat. Nice place to drill. Could drill here on this side too, which it might be a good spot, so that I can maximize the distance there. So let's go ahead and put our tools out here. Drill. So we got a nice root flare right here coming up. So anywhere on this side of the tree is a good spot to tap. I got a nice even spot there. Hopefully there you can see the slight angle that I'm drilling at. You can see the tape, and I'm just drilling in. And I'm pulling back like that to clear out all that sawdust, that frass, or whatever you want to refer to it. It wouldn't be frass, but that really helps keep the hole clean. Looking in there, I don't see any build up, so I don't even need my little pokey tool. What I do need is a spile. can already see sap running from this guy too. So we're going to just tap that in. Lightly. There we go. Got a good seal there in the trunk. I'm going to need this tubing. That's a little long. A lot of these longer ones came from a really big tree I used to tap on my parents' property. We may get to that. That'll work. So again, we're going to get our hot water here and tap this out. Oop, it's dripping already. I can see it. Yep, see the drip. Drip. Nice, very nice. So we got good flow goings already. Now, typically speaking, when it comes to sugaring like this, the flows, they say, and I have seen this, typically are best when you have freezing temperatures at night, followed by temperatures in the 40s and 50s the next day. Well, this whole week it stayed above freezing overnight. So to even see that kind of flow already, I'm pretty happy about that. But this weekend, that temperature is supposed to dip. Thus, it could lead to increased flow and production. You know, fingers crossed, we'll hope so. But it's always a crapshoot, really. It's always kind of a gamble, because I've had trees already that were nice and big like this, and I might get a gallon a day. I have other trees that maybe a little bit bigger than this, and within 24 hours, I could have 2 of these jugs overflowing. I've had some trees that I tapped and they produce a gallon a day. The next, and you know, after 2 or 3 days of production, done. There would be absolutely no sap or syrup coming out of them. So it varies. You just never know what you're going to get, and that's part of the fun of it. And so, all right, there's tree number 2 tapped. I have a third one scouted out further down the property here that I'm going to go tap yet too. That's a red maple, so we'll take a look at that when we get down there too. I have another silver maple here behind me, but that one's big enough, but I don't know. We'll see what these do. Maybe I'll throw a tap on those too. But for now, that's what we got. Thanks for joining.